Not every story has a nice, tidy ending. Not every case is solved, and not every criminal is brought to justice. In the case of JonBenét Ramsey, who was murdered when she was aged just 6, nobody has ever been convicted of this crime. She was found dead in her home the day after Christmas in 1996 in the usually peaceful university town of Boulder, Colorado. Her parents, Patsy and John Ramsey, were for a while suspects. Patsy has now died. Her father, John, is still alive. She has a brother, Burke, who is probably not involved in the case. So this is how the case went. On December the 26th at 5:45 a.m., her mother, Patsy, called the police, and they arrived a few minutes later. The Ramseys also called various friends who also came to the house. What Patsy had found was a ransom note saying that her daughter, JonBenét, had been kidnapped. Well, if it's a kidnapping, then the crime scene is likely to be the girl's bedroom and any entrances and passageways. The house was searched and a body was finally found at 1 p.m. The body, remarkably, was found by the father. Examination of the body showed a fractured skull due to the impact of a blunt object. In addition, she'd been subject to ligature strangulation. That is, a rope had been put round her neck and tightened, and that rope had been wrapped around the handle of a broken paintbrush from Patsy's painting equipment. It's not clear which of these two events had killed her. Opinions appear to differ on whether she had been sexually assaulted. In addition, her hands were loosely tied, not tightly tied to prevent any movement, but very loosely tied, and her mouth had been covered with duct tape. Now, there's something odd about the duct tape, because if someone is alive and you slap duct tape over their mouth, they're going to keep moving their mouth under the duct tape. But when the duct tape was removed from JonBenét's mouth, there was a perfect lip print, which you wouldn't get from a moving mouth, which indicates that JonBenét was either unconscious or dead when the duct tape was put on her mouth. Now, here's the house. It's a big house. JonBenét's bedroom is up on the 2nd floor. The ransom note was found on the 1st floor in the kitchen. The body was found in a far room down in the basement. Now, let's look at the ransom note. Now, there are many aspects to this case, and it's very controversial, but let's focus on the ransom note. There are many strange things about the ransom note. The first one is that it's written on the Ramseys' own paper with one of their own pens. So this is a kidnapper who didn't bring his own stationery with him. There was a first draft of the note which had been discarded. In addition, the ransom note is extremely long, running to 3 pages. Typically, ransom notes are very short, giving just the basics. The ransom note was handwritten. Now, in any crime in a family, other members of the family are always a suspect. So handwriting analysis was used, and that indicated that the note hadn't been written by John, and it was unlikely to have been written by Patsy, but not impossible. Now, here's the note. It says, "Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We do respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter." Now, the way people write can be analyzed, and from the way people write, you can learn something about them. For instance, look at this word here, foreign. Very few people would consider themselves to be foreign. Typically, you always consider other people to be foreign. So is this a note written by an American trying to pretend to be a foreigner? Now look at this. Business is spelt wrongly, as is possession. But as we go through the rest of the note, you'll see that these are the only spelling mistakes in the note. Was someone trying to pretend that they couldn't write English properly, but after they got past the first paragraph, forgot to put in more spelling mistakes? Let's go on. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. You can see this is a very caring kidnapper. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery of the money and hence an earlier delivery pickup of your daughter. Well, there's odd things in this paragraph too. For instance, that $118,000 happens to be the size of John's bonus that year. It's odd that they should ask for such a specific sum and not, given the fact that John Ramsey was a wealthy man, not just put down $1 million. This is the final part. Any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The two gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions and you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. You're not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good Southern common sense of yours. It's up to you now, John. Victory, SBTC. Probably one of the most melodramatic ransom notes of all time. This is something that struck me. Law enforcement countermeasures. If they were foreigners, they would have probably written police. Here's another oddity. Use that good Southern common sense of yours. Yet John Ramsey was born in Nebraska. And this is curious. If you look back to the beginning of the letter, it starts out Mr. Ramsey. How come by the end of the letter they're now on first name terms? And one oddity that has caused a lot of speculation on the internet is the signing of the letter SBTC. And if you go online, you can find all sorts of speculation about what SBT stands for, from the very religious Saved by the Cross through to Santa Barbara Tennis Club. What we can conclude is that this is a very, very strange ransom note and was probably written by somebody merely to divert attention from searching for the body that was in the house. So, who did it? Well, one possibility is an intruder. So if there's an intruder in the house, he should have left traces in the other rooms and the hallways, because every contact leaves a trace. The problem is that the house as a whole was not recognized as a crime scene, and the Ramsey family and their friends were present in the house. So any traces left by any intruder would have been obliterated by all these visitors. Now, there was a broken window leading into the basement, but it turns out that had actually been broken by John Ramsey sometime before, when he'd locked himself out. We also have this evidence of the tape on her mouth. Well, the tape on her mouth, an intruder might have put that there to quieten her, to silence her, but as we've said, she was probably already dead or unconscious when it was put there. Now, what about DNA evidence? Well, if she was subjected to ligature strangulation, we should be able to get DNA off the ligature, that rope that was used to strangle her, or we should have been able to get DNA off her clothes. Well, a certain amount of DNA was obtained from her underwear, and this for a while was regarded as the key to the case. Now, a man called John Mark Carr had been in communication with a journalism professor at the University of Colorado called Michael Tracy, and he'd been sending emails to Michael Tracy, one of which included the statement, "I was with JonBenét when she died." Now, John Mark Carr, by 2006, was in Bangkok. When Michael Tracy informed the Colorado authorities of these emails, they very quickly got Mr. Carr deported from Bangkok back to Colorado. And when he got to Colorado, his sample of his DNA was taken. Now, this whole process had been done in a media spotlight with great fanfare, presumably because the authorities in Colorado were convinced they now had the perpetrator. Unfortunately, this is not how to conduct business, because when John Mark Carr's DNA was compared to the DNA sample from the underwear, all charges against him were dropped. So we saw in the case of Richard III an excellent example of how to manage the media. We see in the case of John Mark Carr an excellent example of how to mismanage the media. So this case is unsolved, and it's one reason for lack of progress is because of mistakes made by the police in the early days. They failed to recognize the whole crime scene, so all sorts of people had access to the house from the morning that JonBenét was known to be missing. They failed to secure the crime scene, and they failed to search the crime scene. The body was not found by a police officer. It was found by the girl's father, brought upstairs to the girl's mother. So any traces by family members could be resulting from the search, and therefore could not be used in evidence. So, who killed JonBenét Ramsey? Perhaps we will never know.